When estate sale organizer Delilah Morse entered the Thornfield house on October 12, 2023, she discovered a dining room that had been untouched for 52 years. 5 dinner plates sat exactly where they'd been left in 1971, when an entire family vanished without a trace. No signs of struggle. No goodbye notes. They were eating dinner one moment, gone the next. But hidden in the basement, Delilah found something that changed everything. A 1985 camera containing recent photos of the missing family, looking exactly as they did in The Thornfields weren't dead. They were trapped somewhere between our world and another, desperately trying to escape. But how can a family survive for 52 years without aging a single day? And who has been keeping them prisoner all this time? The old house on Maple Street looked like it was holding its breath. Delilah Morse pulled her van up to the curb and stared at the Victorian mansion that had been empty for 52 years. Paint peeled from its shutters like old skin. Weeds grew tall around the front porch. But the windows looked like dark eyes watching her. "This is it," she whispered to herself, checking the address on her phone one more time. The bank had hired her company to clean out the Thornfield house before they sold it. Most people in Millbrook, Vermont wouldn't even walk past this place. But Delilah wasn't most people. She grabbed her camera and clipboard from the passenger seat. Her job was simple: take pictures of everything valuable, make a list, and organize an estate sale. She'd done this hundreds of times before. Old houses didn't scare her. So why did her hands shake? As she walked up the front steps, the key turned easily in the lock, as if the house wanted her to come inside. The door creaked open, and a wave of stale air hit her face. It smelled like dust, and something else. Delilah stepped into the front hall. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Sheets covered most of the furniture like ghosts. Sunlight filtered through dirty windows, making everything look grey and forgotten. She pulled out her camera and started taking pictures. The living room was first. A grandfather clock stood frozen at 7:23. Family photos sat on the mantel, their faces hard to see through the dust. A child's toy train lay on its side near the fireplace. "Okay," she said out loud just to hear a voice. "Let's see what we have here." Room by room, she made her way through the house. The kitchen had old appliances and empty cabinets. The bedrooms upstairs were full of clothes still hanging in closets. The child's room had toys scattered on the floor, like someone had been playing and then just left. But it was the dining room that made her stop and stare. The table was still set for dinner. 5 plates sat exactly where they'd been placed 52 years ago. Forks and knives lay beside them. Crystal glasses caught the afternoon light. In the center of the table, a serving dish held the remains of what might have been a roast, now nothing but dust and bone. Delilah felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She'd heard the story, of course. Everyone in town knew about the Thornfield family. On October 13th, 1971, they'd simply vanished. No goodbye notes, no packed bags. They'd been eating dinner. And then, she lifted her camera to take a picture, but her hands were shaking too much. This wasn't just an empty house. This was a frozen moment in time. A family had been here, laughing and talking and living their lives, and then, in an instant, they were gone. "Focus," she told herself. "Just do your job." The sound of footsteps on the front porch made her jump. She turned to see a tall man in a sheriff's uniform walking through the open door. "You must be Delilah," he said, tipping his hat. "I'm Sheriff Bartholomew Kincaid. Folks call me Bart. Just wanted to check on you, make sure you're settling in okay." "I'm fine," she said, though her voice sounded small in the big room. "Just taking inventory." Bart nodded, but his eyes were serious. "This house has a way of getting to people. The Thornfields were good folks. Cornelius was a smart man, worked at the college. His wife Evangeline was sweet as pie. Their kids, Tobias was 16, Serafina was 14, and little Jasper was only 8. What do you think happened to them? The sheriff shrugged. Been asking myself that question for 30 years. I was just a deputy back then, but I helped search this place top to bottom. No signs of struggle, no blood, no broken windows. They just disappeared. Delilah looked back at the dining room table. During dinner? That's right, neighbors said they saw lights on, heard normal family sounds. Next morning, the mailman noticed the front door was wide open. Police found the table exactly like you see it now. A chill ran down Delilah's spine. She'd always been drawn to mysteries, to things that didn't make sense. Maybe it was because her own father had disappeared when she was 7. One day he was there, the next day he wasn't. No explanations, no goodbyes. I'll let you get back to work, Bart said, heading for the door. But Delilah, be careful in this house. Some mysteries are better left alone. After he left, Delilah stood in the silence for a long time. The house felt different now, like it was waiting for something. She looked at the empty chairs around the dining table and wondered what the family's last words had been. Had they been happy? Had they been fighting? Had they known something was about to happen? She was about to leave the dining room when she noticed something strange. One of the chairs was pulled out slightly, as if someone had just stood up. But that was impossible. The house had been sealed for 52 years, wasn't it? That's when she heard it. A sound from somewhere deep in the house. It sounded like footsteps. Slow, careful footsteps coming from the basement. Delilah grabbed her camera and headed for the basement door. Her heart was pounding, but she had to know. She had to see what was down there. The basement stairs creaked under her feet. At the bottom, she found a typical cellar with stone walls and a dirt floor. Old boxes were stacked everywhere. A workbench sat in one corner, nothing scary, nothing unusual. But as she moved her flashlight around the room, something caught her eye. Behind a loose stone in the wall, she saw the edge of something leather. She pulled the stone away and found a small compartment. Inside was an old camera case. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The camera was a 1985 Polaroid. But that was impossible. The house had been empty since 1971. How could there be a camera from and why did it look like someone had used it recently? Delilah stared at the Polaroid camera in her hands. The leather case was old, but the camera inside looked clean. Too clean. She turned it over and found a small sticker on the bottom, property of Millbrook College, photography department. Her mouth went dry. The Thornfield family had disappeared in 1971. This camera was made in 1985. How had it gotten into a sealed house? She checked the film counter. There were pictures still inside, waiting to be developed. Her hands shook as she carefully put the camera back in its case. This wasn't just estate sale inventory anymore. This was evidence. 20 minutes later, she was knocking on the door of Professor Atticus Grimm's office at Millbrook College. She'd found his name in the phone book under photography expert. The elderly man who answered had wild grey hair and thick glasses that made his eyes look huge. "Can I help you?" he asked, looking at the camera case in her hands. "I'm Delilah Morse. I'm cleaning out the Thornfield house, and I found this camera hidden in the basement. I think it might be important." Professor Grimm's face went pale. He stepped back and let her into his office. The room was filled with old cameras, photographs and dusty books. It smelled like chemicals and old paper. "The Thornfield house," he said slowly. "I haven't heard that name in years. May I see the camera?" Delilah handed over the case. Professor Grimm's hands trembled as he opened it. When he saw the Polaroid inside, he sat down heavily in his chair. "I knew this camera," he whispered. "I taught photography at the college in the 1980s. This was one of mine. But how did it get in the house? That's what I'd like to know." He looked up at her with worried eyes. "Did you develop the film?" "Not yet." "I was hoping you could help me." Professor Grimm nodded and led her to a small dark room behind his office. Under the red light, they worked together to develop the pictures. As each image appeared in the developer solution, Delilah felt her skin crawl. The first photo showed the Thornfield dining room, but not as she'd seen it. The table was set with fresh food. Steam rose from a bowl of soup. Bread looked warm and soft. The plates were clean and shiny. "This is impossible," she whispered. "The house has been empty for 52 years. The second photo was worse. It showed the kitchen, but from an angle that didn't make sense. The picture seemed to be taken from inside the refrigerator. Looking out, fresh milk sat on the counter. A pot of coffee steamed on the stove. But it was the third photo that made them both gasp. 5 dark shapes stood in the kitchen with their backs to the camera. They looked like people, but their edges were blurry, like they were made of shadow. One was tall like a man. One was smaller, like a woman. 3 others were different heights, like children. "Who took these pictures?" Delilah asked. Professor Grimm stared at the photos with wide eyes. "I don't know. But whoever it was, they were inside the house recently. Very recently." They developed the rest of the film in silence. More impossible pictures appeared. The living room with a fire burning in the fireplace. A child's bedroom with toys scattered on the floor, but the toys looked new. A bathroom with a wet towel hanging on the rack. "Someone's been living in that house," Delilah said. "But that's impossible. The police would have found them. Unless..." Professor Grimm looked at her with frightened eyes. "Unless they don't want to be found." Delilah drove back to the Thornfield house as the sun was setting. The photos were in her bag, but she couldn't stop thinking about them. Who were the shadow people? Why did the house look lived in when it had been empty for decades? She parked in front of the house and sat in her van for a moment. The windows were dark, but she could swear she saw movement behind one of the curtains upstairs. Inside, the house felt different. The air seemed thicker, like it was holding secrets. She walked through the rooms again, but everything looked the same as before. Dusty furniture, empty rooms. The dining table with its 52-year-old dinner. He was about to leave when she heard it. A sound from upstairs, like someone walking across the floor. Delilah grabbed her flashlight and climbed the stairs. The hallway was dark and quiet. She checked each bedroom, but they were all empty, just old furniture and dust. But in the last bedroom, the one that had belonged to a teenage girl, she found something that made her heart stop. A diary sat on the desk, open to a recent page. The handwriting was young and careful, like a girl's, but the date at the top of the page was from 3 months ago, June 15. "I don't know how much longer I can keep writing in this diary. Papa's experiments are getting worse. The basement room glows at night now, and sometimes I hear strange sounds coming from down there. Mama cries when she thinks we can't hear her. She thinks we don't know what's happening, but we do. Tobias says we need to find a way out, but where can we go? This house is all we know now. Papa says we're helping him make history, but I think we're just helping him make monsters. Sometimes I wonder if anyone will ever find us. If anyone will ever know what really happened to the Thornfield family. I hope someone comes soon. I'm so tired of being afraid. Serafina." Delilah's hands shook as she read the words. Serafina Thornfield had been 14 when her family disappeared in 1971. She would be 66 now. but this handwriting looked like it came from a young girl. She flipped through the diary, page after page of entries, all recent, all written by someone who called herself Serafina. The entries talked about experiments in the basement, about a father who was doing terrible things, about a family trapped in a house with no way out. The last entry was from yesterday, October 12th. Someone new came to the house today. A woman with kind eyes. She took pictures of our dining room, but she couldn't see us. We were right there, but she looked right through us. I tried to move her camera, to make her notice, but my hands went right through it. It's like we're here but not here, like we're caught between being alive and being gone. Tomorrow is October 13th. Papa says tomorrow is important. He says the walls will be thin tomorrow. I don't know what that means, but I'm scared. If someone reads this, please help us. We've been trying to get out for so long. We're still here. We're still alive. We just need someone to see us. Please? Delilah closed the diary with shaking hands. The house was completely silent around her, but she didn't feel alone. She felt like she was being watched. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. Her van was the only car in sight. The neighborhood was quiet, normal. But when she turned back to the room, the diary was gone. In its place was a single photograph. It showed her standing in this exact spot, reading the diary. But she was alone in the room. No one had taken her picture. As she stared at the impossible photograph, she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. Footsteps. Slow, careful footsteps coming from the basement. The same footsteps she'd heard before, but this time they were coming up the stairs. Delilah's heart hammered against her ribs as the footsteps grew louder. Step by step, someone was climbing the stairs. She clutched the impossible photograph in her hands and looked around the room for somewhere to hide. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. "Hello?" she called out, her voice barely a whisper. "Is someone there?" Silence. She waited, holding her breath. Then, slowly, she walked to the bedroom door and peered into the hallway. Empty. The floorboards creaked under her feet as she moved toward the stairs. "I know you're here," she said louder. "I found your diary, Serafina. I know you need help." A door slammed somewhere downstairs. Then another. Then another. Like someone was running through the house, slamming every door they passed. Delilah ran down the stairs, following the sounds. She reached the living room just as the front door swung open by itself. Cold air rushed in, making the curtains. "Wait," she called out. "Don't go, I want to help you." But the house fell silent again. Only the wind through the open door made any sound. Delilah closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the college library. 3rd floor. Come alone." She stared at the message. Who could have her number? And why did they want to meet her at the library? The college library was nearly empty when she arrived. Most students had gone home for the evening. Delilah climbed to the 3rd floor and found herself in a section filled with old books and dusty shelves. "Over here," a voice called softly. She turned to see Professor Grimm sitting at a table in the corner. But he looked different now. Older, sadder. His hands shook as he gestured for her to sit down. "You sent me the text?" she asked. He nodded. "I've been thinking about those photographs all evening. About that camera. There's something I need to tell you, but you're not going to like it." "What is it?" Professor Grimm took a deep breath. "I knew Cornelius Thornfield. We worked together in..." Delilah's eyes widened. "You knew the family?" Cornelius was a physicist, brilliant, but obsessed with time. He believed he could create something he called temporal pockets, small spaces where time moved differently than the rest of the world. "That's impossible." "That's what I thought too. But Cornelius had funding from a government program. They wanted to know if time could be controlled, if people could be made to live longer, or if moments could be frozen forever. Professor Grimm's voice got quieter. I was his research partner. I helped him build the equipment. I thought we were just playing with theories, but Cornelius, he wanted to test it on his family. What? Delilah felt sick. He experimented on his own children? He said he was trying to give them a gift. Immortality. A life that would never end. But something went wrong on October 13, 1971. The experiment didn't make them immortal. It trapped them. Trapped them how? In a parallel time stream. They exist in the same house, but in a different version of reality. Time moves differently for them. They age normally in their world, but to us, they appear frozen. Delilah thought about the diary, about Seraphina's desperate words. But I saw recent diary entries. From this, Professor Grimm nodded sadly. Every 13 years on October 13th, the barrier between their world and ours gets thin. They can leave small signs, notes, photographs, messages asking for help. And you've known about this for 52 years? I've been trying to save them for 52 years. His voice broke. But every time I get close, something goes wrong. The equipment fails. The dimensional breach closes. I can't seem to get them out. Delilah stared at him. You've been photographing them, haven't you? All these years you've been taking pictures of them trapped in that house. Professor Grimm's face crumpled. I had to document it. I had to prove what happened. The government program disappeared after the accident. They covered it up, said the family just vanished. But I knew the truth. So you've been watching them suffer for decades. I've been trying to help them, he said desperately. But the dimensional barrier is too strong. I can only take pictures during the October 13th windows, when the worlds overlap. I've been studying the images, trying to understand how to break them free. Delilah felt anger rising in her chest. You've been treating them like test subjects, just like their father did. No, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She stood up from the table. Those people have been trapped for 52 years, and instead of finding a way to save them, you've been taking pictures of them like they're animals in a zoo. Professor Grimm grabbed her arm. Please, let me explain. Tomorrow is October 13th, the 52nd anniversary. That's a significant number in temporal physics. The barrier will be weaker than it's ever been. So this might be our last chance to save them. But I can't do it alone. I need help. Delilah pulled her arm away. Why should I trust you? You've had 52 years to help them, and you've done nothing. Because I've been waiting for the right person, someone with the right connection. What do you mean? Professor Grimm looked at her with sad, tired eyes. Your father. He was a journalist, wasn't he? He disappeared when you were young. Delilah's blood turned cold. How do you know about my father? He found out about the Thornfield family in 1987. He was investigating the story, getting too close to the truth. He had to be stopped. Stopped by who? By the people who funded Cornelius's research. The government program never really ended. They just went underground. They've been monitoring the situation, making sure the secret stays hidden. Delilah felt the room spinning around her. What happened to my father? He's alive as far as I know, but he was forced to disappear. His family was threatened. He had to choose between his story and your safety. That's impossible. He abandoned us. He left us with nothing. He left you to protect you. But now you're here, investigating the same mystery he was. And tomorrow is October. So what? Professor Grimm leaned forward. So they're going to try to silence you too, just like they did to him. Delilah's phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. Stop digging or you'll disappear, just like your father. This is your only warning. She showed the message to Professor Grimm. His face went pale. It's starting, he whispered. They know you're getting close to the truth. What truth? The truth about what really happened to the Thornfield family. The truth about why they can't escape. The truth about who's been keeping them trapped all these years. I thought you said it was an accident. Professor Grimm shook his head. The experiment going wrong was an accident. But what happened afterward? That was on purpose. What do you mean? Someone has been actively keeping the family trapped. Someone who benefits from their imprisonment. Someone who's been using them for their own experiments. Delilah felt a chill run down her spine. Ooh, I don't know. But I think tomorrow night, when the barriers are weakest, we're going to find out. As they left the library, Delilah noticed something that made her stomach drop. Professor Grimm's car was parked under a streetlight. In the back seat, she could see boxes of photography equipment, cameras, tripods, and dozens of photo albums. Professor, she said slowly, how many pictures have you taken of the Thornfield family over the years? He stopped walking. Why do you ask? Because I'm starting to wonder if you've been trying to save them, or if you've been the one keeping them trapped. Professor Grimm turned to look at her. In the streetlight, his eyes looked different, darker, more dangerous. That's a very good question, he said quietly. And tomorrow night, you're going to get your answer. As he drove away, Delilah realized she was more afraid of Professor Grimm than she was of the mysterious government agents. Because she was starting to understand that the person who had been photographing the Thornfield family for 52 years might not be their friend. He might be their captor. Delilah didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Professor Grimm's dark look under the streetlight. She kept thinking about all those photo albums in his car. How many pictures had he taken over the years? How many times had he watched the Thornfield family suffer without helping them? At 6 in the morning, she drove to Sheriff Kincaid's office. She needed to tell someone what she'd learned. Someone in authority who could help her figure out what to do. But when she walked into the police station, she found Bart sitting at his desk with a stack of old files spread out in front of him. The name Thornfield was written on the top folder in big red letters. Delilah, he said, looking up with tired eyes. I was hoping you'd come by. Sheriff, I need to tell you something important about Professor Grimm and the Thornfield family. Sit down, Bart interrupted. His voice was serious in a way that made her stomach twist. We need to talk. She sat in the chair across from his desk. What's wrong? Bart opened one of the files and turned it toward her. Inside were dozens of photographs, pictures of the Thornfield house taken at different times over the years. Pictures of the family's shadows moving behind windows. Pictures of the basement where strange lights glowed. Where did you get these? She asked. We've been watching the house for 52 years, Bart said quietly. Not just local police, federal agents, government people. The Thornfield case never really closed. Delilah felt cold. You've known all along that they were still alive. We've known something was wrong with that house. We've known people sometimes see things there, hear things. But we were told to keep quiet about it. Told by who? By the same people who funded Cornelius Thornfield's research. The project didn't end when the family disappeared. It just went underground. Delilah stared at him. You're part of the cover-up. I'm part of the protection detail, Bart said. My job is to keep people away from the house, to make sure the secret stays safe. Protection detail? You're protecting the people who trapped that family. I'm protecting everyone. Bart's voice got harder. Do you have any idea what would happen if this story got out? If people knew the government had been experimenting with time travel? There would be panic, chaos. So you just let an innocent family suffer for 52 years? We've been trying to find a solution. Scientists have been working on the problem, but every attempt to free them has failed. Delilah felt sick. And Professor Grimm? What's his role in all this? Bart's face darkened. Atticus Grimm is not who you think he is. What do you mean? He wasn't just Cornelius's research partner. He was the lead scientist on the project. The temporal displacement experiment was his idea, but he said he was trying to help them. He's been studying them, Bart said. For 52 years, he's been documenting how people behave when trapped in a temporal pocket. It's the longest-running psychological experiment in human history. Delilah's hands shook. He's been torturing them. He's been learning from them. Every 13 years, when the dimensional barrier weakens, he goes to the house and takes more pictures. More notes, more data about how their minds are breaking down. And you let it? We don't have a choice. The government project is bigger than just one family. They're trying to understand time itself. The Thornfields are unfortunate casualties. Delilah stood up from her chair. Those people aren't casualties, they're victims. And you're all murderers. Sit down, Delilah. No, I'm going to that house. I'm going to find a way to help them. You can't. Bart's voice was cold now, because if you try you'll disappear just like your father did. The room went silent. Delilah stared at him. You know what happened to my father? Marcus Morse was a good journalist. Too good. He figured out the connection between the Thornfield disappearance and the government time research. He was going to publish the story. So you killed him. We relocated him. New identity. New life. Far away from his family. It was the only way to keep everyone safe. You destroyed my family to protect your secret. We saved your family. If Marcus had published that story, all of you would have been killed. This way, you got to grow up. You got to have a life. Delilah felt tears burning her eyes. He didn't abandon us. You took him away. Yes. Where is he? I can't tell you that. But he's alive. He's safe. And if you walk away from this investigation right now, you can stay safe too. And if I don't? Bart opened another file. Inside were surveillance photos of Delilah. Pictures of her at work, at home, at the grocery store. Pictures taken over the past few weeks. We've been watching you since you took this job, he said. We know where you live, where you work, what you eat for breakfast. If you become a problem, you'll disappear just like your father did. Delilah's mind raced. She thought about Seraphina's diary, about the desperate words of a young girl who had been trapped for decades, about a family that had been used as test subjects by the very people who were supposed to protect. What if I agree to walk away, she asked. What happens to the Thornfield family? They stay where they are. The research continues. Eventually maybe we'll find a way to free them. In how long? Another 50 years, Bart shrugged. Science takes time. And Professor Grimm keeps taking his pictures? Professor Grimm does his job. Delilah stood up and walked toward the door. I need to think about this. Don't think too long, Bart called after her. Tomorrow is October 13th. After tomorrow, the dimensional barrier will be strong again for another 13 years. If you're going to make a decision, make it soon. Delilah left the police station feeling lost and afraid. Everyone she'd trusted was part of the conspiracy. The sheriff. The professor. Probably half the town. The Thornfield family had been trapped for 52 years, and no one was coming to save them. Except maybe her. She drove back to the Thornfield house and sat in her van, staring at the dark windows. Somewhere inside that house, 5 people were living a nightmare that had lasted for decades. They were aging. They were suffering. They were slowly losing their minds. And tomorrow night, the dimensional barrier would be weakest. Tomorrow night might be their last chance for escape. but it might also be her last chance to avoid disappearing forever. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The basement holds the key, but beware, not everyone who claims to help you is your friend. Some secrets are worth dying for, others are worth living for. Choose wisely, someone who knows the truth. She stared at the message. Who was sending these texts? Was it someone trying to help her? Or was it another trap? As she sat there thinking, she noticed something that made her heart stop. In one of the upstairs windows, a curtain moved. Just slightly. Like someone had been watching her, and then stepped back. But the house was supposed to be empty. She grabbed her flashlight and camera and got out of the van. If the Thornfield family was trying to communicate with her, she needed to listen. Even if it meant risking everything. Even if it meant ending up trapped just like them. Because some things were more important than safety. Some things were worth fighting for, even if you knew you might lose. As she walked up to the front door, she whispered a promise to the empty air. "I'm coming, Serafina. I'm going to find a way to get you out." Behind her, she didn't see the black car that had been following her all day. She didn't see the man with the camera taking pictures of her entering the house. And she didn't see Professor Grimm in the passenger seat, checking his watch and smiling. Tomorrow was October 13th. And he had been waiting 52 years for someone like Delilah to finally complete his experiment. October 13th. Delilah woke up before dawn with a terrible feeling in her stomach. Today was the day. Today, the dimensional barrier would be weakest. Today, she would either save the Thornfield family or join them in their prison forever. She drove to the house as the sun was rising. The autumn air was cold, and fog hung around the old Victorian like ghostly fingers. But something was different this morning. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive. She parked across the street and watched the windows. In the early morning light, she could see shadows moving inside. Real shadows of real people. The Thornfield family was becoming visible as the barrier between worlds grew thin. A phone rang. Professor Grimm. Delilah, his voice was excited. "Are you at the house? Can you see them?" "I can see shadows." "Perfect. The dimensional overlap is beginning. By tonight they'll be almost solid. That's when we make our move." "Our move?" "I have equipment in my car. Special cameras and sensors that can track the dimensional frequency. We're going to document this historic moment." Delilah felt sick. Even now, even today, he was thinking about taking pictures instead of saving lives. "Professor, I don't want to document anything. I want to get them out." "My dear girl, that's exactly what we're going to do. But we need to be scientific about it. We need to understand the process. They're not lab rats." "Of course not. They're people. Wonderful, brave people who have sacrificed so much for science. But think about what we can learn from them. Think about what their experience could teach us about time itself." Delilah hung up the phone. She was done listening to Professor Grimm. Done being part of his twisted experiment. She walked across the street and up to the front door. As her hand touched the doorknob, she heard a voice from inside. Faint, but clear.
"Help us."
The voice was young. Female. Serafina. "I'm here," Delilah called out. "I'm going to help you." The door opened easily, like the house wanted her inside. The dining room looked different now. The old, dusty table was still there, but overlaying it like a double-exposed photograph was another table. This one had fresh food, steam rising from hot soup. A family sitting around it, eating dinner. But they weren't solid. They looked like ghosts made of light and shadow. Delilah could see them clearly now. Cornelius sat at the head of the table, but his eyes were empty and staring. He looked broken, like his mind had snapped years ago. Evangeline sat beside him, tears streaming down her face. She looked older, sadder, but still beautiful. The children were the most heartbreaking. Tobias was a teenager, but his eyes held the wisdom and pain of a man who had lived through 52 years of horror. Little Jasper sat quietly, rocking back and forth. He looked like a child, but Delilah could see the madness lurking behind his young face. And Serafina. Sweet, brave Serafina, who had been writing in her diary and leaving messages for decades. She looked up and saw Delilah standing in the doorway. "You came back," she whispered. "I promised I would. Can you see us?" "Yes, I can see all of you." Evangeline looked up with hope in her eyes. "Are you real? Or are you another dream?" "I'm real, and I'm going to get you out of here." Cornelius suddenly looked up from his plate. When he spoke, his voice was broken and tired. "You can't save us. The experiment, it went wrong. We're trapped between seconds, between heartbeats, between one moment and the next. There has to be a way out." "The basement," Serafina said urgently. "Papa's laboratory is still down there. The machine that trapped us. If we could turn it off." "I'll go look." "Wait." Tobias stood up from the table. "It's dangerous. The machine is still running, still pulling us back whenever we try to leave. And tonight something bad is going to happen." "What do you mean?" "The man with the camera. He's been watching us for so long, taking pictures. But tonight is different. Tonight he's bringing something else, something that will make sure we never escape." Delilah's blood ran cold. "Professor Grimm? Is that his name?" Serafina asked. "He's been our captor for 52 years. He tells people he's trying to help us, but he's not. He's the one keeping us here." "How?" "The machine in the basement needs someone to operate it from the outside," Cornelius said, his voice get clearer as he talked about his science. "Someone has to keep adjusting the dimensional frequency to maintain the temporal pocket. Without that person, we would have escaped decades ago. Professor Grimm has been operating the machine. Every October 13th, he comes here and resets the controls. He's been our jailer all along." Delilah felt rage burning in her chest. "That monster. He told me he was trying to save you." "He's been studying us," Evangeline said bitterly, "watching how we age, how we suffer, how our minds break down. We're his life's work." "Not anymore." Delilah headed for the basement door. "I'm going to destroy that machine." "Be careful," Serafina called after her. "He'll be here soon, and he won't let you interfere with his experiment." The basement looked different than it had before. Now Delilah could see the laboratory that existed in the dimensional overlap. Strange machines hummed with electric power. Screens showed waves and numbers she didn't understand. And in the center of it all was a large device that looked like something from a science fiction movie. The temporal displacement machine. She walked over to it, looking for an off switch, but the controls were too complicated. She didn't know which buttons to press or which wires to pull. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you." She spun around. Professor Grimm stood at the bottom of the stairs carrying a metal briefcase. He looked different now, not like a kind old professor, but like a scientist who had spent 52 years studying human suffering. "Get away from that machine," she said. "I'm afraid I can't do that. Tonight is very important. Tonight, I'm going to complete the greatest experiment in human history. By torturing an innocent family, by proving that human consciousness can exist outside of normal time. The Thornfields have shown me things I never dreamed possible. They've taught me how the mind adapts to temporal displacement, how love survives even in impossible circumstances." Professor Grimm opened his briefcase. Inside were strange devices and what looked like a large camera. "What is that?" "This is going to record their final moments in the temporal pocket. Tonight, I'm going to collapse their dimensional prison permanently. They'll be frozen at this exact moment forever. A perfect specimen of human consciousness trapped in time. You're going to kill them. I'm going to preserve them. They'll live forever, in a single perfect moment. That's not living. That's torture. That's immortality. Delilah lunged for the machine, but Professor Grimm grabbed her arm. He was stronger than he looked, and his grip was iron tight. You're too late, he said. The process has already begun. The dimensional barriers are collapsing. In 10 minutes, the Thornfield family will be trapped forever, and you'll be trapped with them. Let me go. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, I need someone to witness this moment, someone to verify that the experiment was successful. You're going to be my final observer. Delilah looked around desperately. The machines were humming louder now. Lights were flashing faster. She could hear the family upstairs calling her name, their voices getting fainter as the dimensional pocket began to collapse. She had to do something. She had to save them. But Professor Grimm had planned this for 52 years. He had equipment she didn't understand and knowledge she couldn't match. Unless... She thought about Seraphina's diary, about the words of a brave young girl who had never given up hope, even after decades of imprisonment. Professor, she said, what if I told you there was something about this experiment that you don't know? Something that could make your research even more important. He looked interested despite himself. What are you talking about? What if I told you that the Thornfield family isn't the only one affected by the temporal displacement? Explain. Delilah took a deep breath. She was about to tell the biggest lie of her life, but it might be the only way to save everyone. What if I told you that I'm not just a random person who found this house? What if I told you that I'm connected to the temporal experiment in ways you never imagined? Professor Grimm's eyes widened. What do you mean? What if I told you that I'm Seraphina's daughter? Professor Grimm's grip on Delilah's arm loosened. His eyes went wide behind his thick glasses. That's impossible, he whispered. Seraphina has been trapped in the temporal pocket since 1971. She's never left the house, hasn't she? Delilah asked, her heart pounding. She was making this up as she went along, but something deep inside her felt like she was telling the truth. You said the dimensional barriers weaken every 13 years. What if she escaped once? What if she lived in our world just long enough to... No. Professor Grimm shook his head. I would have known. I've been monitoring the house for 52 years. If anyone had escaped, I would have detected it. But even as he said it, doubt crept into his voice. He let go of Delilah's arm and pulled out a thick notebook filled with dates and measurements. 1984, 1997, 2010. He flipped through pages frantically. Wait. 1995. There was an anomaly in 1995. The dimensional readings were wrong for 3 months. I thought it was equipment failure. Delilah felt a strange tingling in her hands. What happened in the temporal pocket destabilized. I couldn't get clear readings on how many people were inside. For 3 months it looked like there were only 4 family members instead of 5. And when was I born, Professor? His face went pale. You said you were 28. That would make your birth year. Fuel. The notebook fell from his hands. But that would mean I'm not just some random person who found this house. I'm genetically connected to the temporal experiment. I'm part of the family you've been studying for 52 years. Professor Grimm stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Your eyes, he whispered. They're the same color as Seraphina's. And your face. You have Evangeline's nose. Delilah felt tears burning her eyes. She had started this as a lie to distract him. But the more she said it, the more it felt true. All her life she had felt like something was missing. like she didn't quite belong in the normal world, like she was searching for a family she had never known. If this is true, Professor Grimm said slowly, then you're the key I've been waiting for. A genetic anchor that can stabilize the dimensional breach. You could help me complete the experiment. I'm not helping you with anything. I'm here to save my family. Your family? A voice called from upstairs. It was Serafina, but her voice sounded different now. Stronger. More alive. Dalila ran up the basement stairs with Professor Grimm close behind her. In the dining room, the Thornfield family looked more solid than before. But it was Serafina who had changed the most. She looked directly at Dalila with tears streaming down her face. I knew it, she whispered. I knew you would come back to us. What do you mean? I escaped, Serafina said. In 1995, the barriers were weak, and I found a way out. I lived in your world for 3 months. I fell in love with a kind man named David Morse. I was so happy, so free. Delilah's legs felt weak. David Morse was my father's name. I know, sweetheart, because he was your father, and I'm your mother. The room spun around Delilah. Everything made sense now. Her father hadn't abandoned them. He had been protecting them from people who wanted to use Delilah's connection to the temporal experiment. Her mysterious pull toward unsolved mysteries, her ability to see and hear things others couldn't in this house. Her lifelong feeling that she was searching for something she'd lost. But you went back, Delilah said. You left. Serafina's face crumpled. I didn't have a choice. The temporal pocket was pulling me back. I could feel it getting stronger every day. If I had stayed, it would have pulled you in too. So I said goodbye to your father and came back to protect you. You've been trapped here for 28 years because of me. I've been trapped here for 52 years because of my father's experiment. But I've been fighting to survive for 28 years because of you. Professor Grimm stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with excitement. This is perfect. Better than I ever imagined. Second-generation temporal subject. We can study how the genetic connection affects dimensional travel. Stay away from my daughter, Evangeline said fiercely. For the first time in decades, she looked strong instead of broken. You don't understand, Professor Grimm said. This changes everything. With Delilah here, I can create a permanent temporal loop. The family will exist forever, and I'll have unlimited time to study them. No, Tobias stood up from the table. We've suffered enough. You've contributed to the greatest scientific discovery in human history. You should be proud. We've been your prisoners, Cornelius said, his voice suddenly clear and angry. But no. Professor Grimm pulled out a device that looked like a remote control. I'm afraid you don't have a choice. The temporal pocket is collapsing. In 5 minutes you'll all be frozen forever, including your precious daughter. Unless what? Delilah asked. Unless we reverse the process. Unless we use your genetic connection to stabilize the dimensional breach and send everyone back to where they belong. What would that mean? Serafina looked at her with love and sadness. It would mean undoing the past 52 years. It would mean going back to 1971 and stopping the experiment before it happens. But that would erase everything. My entire life would never have happened. No, Evangeline said softly, you would still be born, but you would be born in the right timeline, where your mother never had to leave you. Delilah looked around at her family, at Serafina, who had sacrificed everything to protect her, at Tobias, who had grown up in a nightmare, at little Jasper, whose childhood had been stolen, at Evangeline and Cornelius, who had lost 52 years of their lives. What do I have to do? The machine in the basement responds to temporal genetic markers, Cornelius explained, his scientist mind taking over. If you touch the central control while the dimensional barriers are collapsing, it will create a feedback loop. The temporal pocket will reverse itself, taking us all back to the moment before the experiment began. But she'll cease to exist, Professor Grimm said desperately. Everything she knows, everyone she's met, her entire life will be erased. No, Serafina said firmly. She'll exist as she was always meant to. As my daughter, born in 1995 when I was free to love her father and raise her properly. Delilah felt peace settling over her. You'll all be free. We'll all be free. Then let's do it. Professor Grimm lunged for her, but Tobias grabbed him. Even after 52 years of captivity, the teenage boy was strong enough to hold the old man back. You can't stop this, Professor Grimm screamed. 52 years of research. The greatest experiment in human history. Some things are more important than science, Delilah said. Like family, like love, like giving people the freedom to live their own lives. She ran down to the basement with her family following behind her. The temporal machine was humming louder now, lights flashing frantically. The dimensional pocket was collapsing, just like Professor Grimm had said. Hurry, Serafina called. We only have a few seconds. Delilah reached out toward the central control panel. As her hand got closer, she could feel electricity in the air. The machine recognized her genetic signature. I love you, Mom, she said, looking back at Serafina. I love you too, sweetheart. I always have. Delilah touched the control panel. The world exploded into light. October 30. 14-year-old Serafina Thornfield woke up in her bedroom with the strangest feeling. She had dreamed about a grown-up daughter she'd never had. About a house that became a prison. About 52 years of suffering that somehow felt like memories. But it was just a dream, wasn't it? She got dressed and went downstairs for breakfast. Her father was in his laboratory, working on some new experiment. Her mother was making pancakes. Tobias was reading a book at the kitchen table. Little Jasper was playing with his toy cars. Everything was normal. Everything was as it should be. But when her father called the family for dinner that evening, Serafina made a decision that surprised everyone. Papa, she said, I don't think you should do your experiment tonight. What experiment, sweetheart? The one in the basement. The one with the lights and the machines. I had a dream that something terrible would happen if you turned it on. Cornelius looked puzzled. How did you know about? I haven't told anyone about tonight's test. Please don't do it, Papa. Please. I have a feeling that if you do, we'll lose everything we love. Cornelius looked at his daughter's frightened face. He thought about the temporal displacement machine waiting in the basement. He thought about his theories and his research and his dreams of scientific glory. Then he thought about his family sitting around the dinner table, safe and happy and free. Okay, sweetheart, he said, turning off the basement lights. If it worries you that much, I won't do the experiment. Promise? I promise. And 24 years later, when Serafina Thornfield married David Morse and had a beautiful daughter named Delilah, she told her husband about the strange dream she'd had as a teenager. The dream that had saved her family from a terrible fate. But it hadn't been a dream at all. It had been a memory of a future that would never happen, sent back through time by the love between a mother and daughter. Some bonds are stronger than time itself. And sometimes love really can change everything. And that's how one night of disrespect changed everything forever. Sometimes the most ordinary-looking person can be the most extraordinary. We'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's amazing to see our global family growing every day. If this story touched your heart or taught you something about treating others with kindness, please hit that like button. It really helps us reach more people who need to hear these messages. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that could change your perspective on life. Every subscriber helps us spread more kindness around the world. Speaking of amazing stories, there's another incredible tale waiting for you right on your screen. Click on it now. Trust us, you won't want to miss what happens next. Until next time, remember, kindness costs nothing, but it's worth everything. Keep spreading good vibes, and we'll see you in the next story.